Hey guys, tonight we drift back, way back, to a sun-bleached coast where the Mediterranean hums, salt crusts on your skin, and the smell of drying sardines clings to everything. You're standing on the dock of a Phoenician port city, probably Tyre or Sidon. Those street signs aren't exactly booming right now. Ships creak lazily at anchor, their hulls packed with glass, purple dye, ciderwood, and something that doesn't look like cargo stories waiting to be written. You're a merchant's apprentice, which means you carry things, fetch things, and try not to fall into the harbor while doing either. Your tunic is too short, your hands are too calloused, and you're pretty sure you've got tar in your hair. Welcome to your glamorous life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Phoenician time is basically just sunup and sundown. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're watching a dockworker scribble something into soft clay with a sharpened stick. It's not quite Egyptian hieroglyphs, more like a shorthand mess of scratches that somehow mean 6 amphorae of salted fish. You're curious because the last time you saw writing, it was on a temple wall surrounded by divine birds and pharaohs the size of houses. This is more like doodling. The city bustles behind you, clanging bronze, clattering hooves, seagulls screaming their eternal argument over a discarded fig. You chew on a piece of flatbread and stare at the wet smudge of letters in the clay, not knowing you're staring at history's first napkin sketch of the alphabet. Phoenicians don't invent things in a lab or a lecture hall. They do it between loading cargo and arguing over lunch bills. The alphabet doesn't arrive with thunderbolts or prophecies. It sneaks in on the smell of grilled mackerel and mingles with gossip over wine. This harbor, hot, noisy, a little fishy, is actually a crucible. Goods come in, stories go out. Every trade deal requires records, and every record needs writing that doesn't take a decade to learn. That's the quiet pressure building, the need to write faster, simpler, smarter. You won't survive another tax form in Egyptian. Historians still argue whether the first alphabetic symbols came from Byblos or further inland, possibly influenced by Semitic speaking workers in Egyptian territories. What we know is something's brewing here that isn't just pickled anchovies. You trudge along the dock and bump into a man balancing an armful of cedar planks. He curses in Phoenician. At least, that's what you think it is. Everyone here speaks a medley of tongues, bits of Egyptian, Canaanite, maybe some Ugaritic on weekends. It's like being stuck in the world's first overly ambitious Duolingo course. Later, you help load amphorae into a boat with sails dyed an imperial purple so rare it might as well be made of unicorns. The dye, by the way, comes from murex snails. You know, the ones that stink and ooze slime. Phoenicians harvest them by the thousands. You're surrounded by vats of snail goo and still trying to remember the difference between aleph and ox. You rest in the shade, sipping watered wine from a chipped cup, staring again at the clay symbols. They're phonetic, someone tells you. Not pictures of things, but sounds. Revolutionary, but somehow obvious. Like realizing you could just say, burger, instead of carving out a cow, a fire, a man chewing, and a divine blessing. There's a scribe nearby who's practicing the early letters. You count maybe 20 of them, sharp angles and purposeful slashes. One looks like a house, another like a stick figure trying to do yoga. You wonder if they'll catch on. Maybe kids will use them. Maybe kings will ignore them. Probably both. A fringe story says the alphabet idea first took shape during a lunch break in a carpentry yard. Someone scrawling symbols on cedar shavings between bites of cheese and dates. Might be apocryphal. Might be brilliant. Either way, it's got better pacing than most origin myths. Your eyelids droop as the sun lowers and the sea turns to melted copper. You close your eyes briefly, hearing dock chatter fade into a dreamlike rhythm trade. Travel, write, repeat. You don't know it yet, but you're part of a linguistic revolution that won't just cross oceans. It'll cross millennia. And yes, it'll eventually help some guy in the future make alphabet soup, probably without realizing his lunch owes a little something to you. The sun's barely up, and you're already wobbling aboard a narrow Phoenician merchant ship, the deck slick with seawater, and something suspiciously oily, possibly anchovy juice. Your job is simply stay out of the way, don't fall overboard, and try not to sneeze near the fragile glass amphory. The wind smells like salt and pine tar, and gulls wheel above like they own the place. Your ship, about the size of an overfed canoe, is bound for Cyprus, or Crete, or wherever people have gold to trade for cedar and purple dye. Navigation's more vibe than science. The captain glares at the sky, squints at the horizon, and declares, "East." You're not entirely sure if that's where you're headed, or just where he wants to argue next. Phoenicians are sailors first, scribes second. They move across the Mediterranean like it's their personal driveway, side into Byblos. Tired of Carthage, they've got ports like some people collect sandals, and with every voyage, they're hauling more than goods. They're carrying conversations, rumors, and slowly, painfully slowly, a new way to write. You lounge near a pile of ropes and overhear a crewman reading aloud from a scrap of wood etched with symbols. It's a cargo manifest, and it sounds kind of musical. The letters aren't pretty like Egyptian art or massive like cuneiform tablets. They're lean, efficient, like shorthand for people who've got places to be. There's a theory that the sea made the alphabet necessary. When you're 1,000 miles from home, with 10 jars of expensive dye and a really tight profit margin, you don't want a miscommunication. A single wrong symbol could mean 5 barrels instead of 15, or livestock instead of olive oil, which, to be fair, both smell weird after a week on the boat. Historians still debate whether these early alphabetic symbols were used onboard ships first or in inland trade stations, but either way, sailors like you are spreading them like breadcrumbs. By accident, really. You don't set out to revolutionize writing. You just want your lunch shipment labeled correctly. Lunch, by the way, is fish. Again, you make a half-hearted joke about inventing a symbol just for sardine. The crew laughs, kind of. One guy mimes a fish with his hands and says,
"That could be bet."
Everyone nods, more out of sunstroke than agreement. By the third day, the wind dies. You're stuck in the middle of a sparkling blue expanse. Your sail limp, your patience fried. Someone breaks out a wax tablet and tries sketching out a few new letter variations. It's a game, almost a way to pass time. Sound to symbol. Symbol to sound, like teaching a rock to talk. You scribble one that vaguely resembles a cow's head and assign it the A sound. It feels right. Aleph. It's a strong, throaty sound, like the beginning of something. You lean back, squint at the sun, and mutter, "Bet." As you carve a simple square to stand for a house. You've made it through 2 letters over salted almonds and flat wine. At this rate, you'll have the whole alphabet by next Tuesday. That's the thing, though. No one plans a system like this. It grows, like mold or sibling rivalries. You reuse old symbols, ditch the complex ones, and tinker endlessly. It's less invention and more lunch doodling meets necessity. You remember how Egyptians used pictures for everything? Gods, seasons, royal tantrums, and how their scribes trained for decades. You, on the other hand, just invented G, because a goat wandered by. Goat sound, goat symbol. Done. Phoenician ships become the ultimate test market. You scribble your symbols on wooden crates, tarps, and sometimes just the ship railings. The sea wears some away, others stick. When you dock, local traders peek at your markings. Some laugh. Some steal them. The best ones survive. That's evolution, baby. And slowly, you begin to notice something odd. Your scribbles show up in markets you've never been to. On jars you didn't pack. It's like the letters are migrating on their own, sneaking into new cities in the bellies of ships. One quirky story passed among crewmen claims a crate labeled with the early alphabet was mistaken for a magic spell in a distant village. The locals copied the symbols onto their doors to ward off bad spirits. Functional illiteracy meets cargo cult chick. You watch dolphins leap in the distance, and it hits you you're not just moving spices and logs, you're trafficking in symbols. One plank, one scratch crate, one idle lunchtime experiment at a time. You're building the bones of every future written word. Of course, your captain just wants to know where his lentil shipment went. You decide not to tell him it's under L. The harbor is bustling when you dock in Byblos, a city so old its buildings practically lean from exhaustion. You hop off the ship with a scroll tucked under your arm, a gift for the customs clerk, and immediately get hit with a smell that's equal parts roasted barley, wet linen, and something that might be donkey sweat. Welcome back to land. You're here to trade cedarwood, but your real challenge today: negotiation. You speak Phoenician, or something close to it, but the clerk prefers Egyptian. The merchant behind you is muttering in Hittite. The guy sweeping the street just barked a phrase in something Ugaritic sounding. Everyone's trying to buy, sell, barter, or threaten, but the languages are all tangled like ropes in a storm. You try to communicate the number of crates you've got with your fingers. That doesn't go well. You end up miming a fish and somehow agree to deliver 10 goats. That's when it hits you. This whole writing thing could really use a glow up. Hieroglyphs are fine if you're a priest or a bored tomb decorator. Cuneiform works if you've got a lifetime to master clay slabs. But what about normal people? Busy traders. Lunch, shouting dock workers. Historians still argue whether the first truly phonetic scripts emerged from a need to record language or simplify multilingual chaos. But you're living the chaos now. It's exhausting. It's comedic. It's deeply inefficient. At a food stall, you overhear two scribes from tire testing out a new trick. One scratches a symbol in the dirt and says, "Buh." The other nods, adds a slanted line, and says, "J." They're trying to build a toolbox of sounds. Compact, reusable, not tied to any single language. Your ears perk up. You casually sit nearby and nibble a date. They're not inventing a new language. They're creating a code for all spoken ones. Something that turns sound into squiggle, squiggle into sound. And once that's done, well, any merchant from any port can read without learning 1,000 pictographs. It's kind of genius. And also kind of obvious. Like finally deciding to put wheels on a suitcase. You scribble a few of their symbols in your notebook. One that looks like a ladder, one like a hook. You repeat the sounds in your head as you walk. You don't know what you're writing yet, but it feels like a sentence waiting to happen. Later, at the local temple market, you test out a theory. You write 3 of your favorite symbols on a piece of wood and show them to a spice vendor. He squints, tilts his head, and says, "Salt." You shake your head. He tries again. "Lentils?" Still no. You tell him the sounds one by one. K, rye. He repeats them and suddenly grins. "Crab," he says. You both laugh, and just like that, a new word is born. Not through shared language, but shared sounds. Back at the inn, you eavesdrop on a scholar drunkenly ranting that the gods will be displeased by this letter nonsense. Words belong to the divine. He slurs, not to market boys and scribblers with dirty feet. His friend shrugs and replies, "Well, too late." There's a fringe story going around that a young trader once won a lawsuit in Tyre. In Tyre simply because he wrote his version of the contract more clearly than his opponent's scribbled pictograms. Judges favored the alphabetic version because, well, they could actually read it. More and more, people are realizing that having a few dozen letter symbols is easier to teach, faster to write, and way cheaper than carving cuneiform novels into tablets the size of dinner plates. You spend the evening comparing your notebook to a carved stone you find by the well. Same symbols. Same rough order. Your brain tingles like you just figured out how to cheat at taxes. You realize, over a steaming bowl of goat stew, that you're not just learning a new writing system. You're helping invent it. Every cargo manifest, every dockside joke, every mispronounced fish order, it's shaping the symbols. In a corner, a small child etches some of the letters into the dirt with a stick, copying what her brother taught her. You watch her hands, small and quick, and think she'll grow up knowing how to write her own thoughts, not someone else's gods. That's the difference, isn't it? Hieroglyphs belong to priests, cuneiform to scribes, but this new alphabet, it's for lunch menace, for IOUs, for kids scratching secrets in the sand. You walk outside, the air cooler now, the stars blinking like old friends. Somewhere across the sea, someone else is probably inventing a symbol for moon. Maybe it'll be shaped like a fish hook. Maybe like a sleeping eye. You hum a little Phoenician tune under your breath and think language is a funny thing. And sometimes, the best revolutions start with a crab joke. The morning sun slants through the narrow alleys of Tyre as you sit on a rickety stool, hunched over a wax tablet with your tongue sticking out in deep concentration. Today's task, copying the Egyptian pictograph for fish. It's the 8th time you've tried. And it's still ugly. The original is elegant, fluid, unmistakably piscine. Yours looks like a seahorse got run over by a cart. You sigh and press your stylus into the wax again. Stroke. Loop. Flick. Smudge. The teacher behind you grunts noncommittally. Better. He lies. Phoenicians love trade, but they still bow to Egyptian writing. At least for official stuff. Temples, treaties, shipping documents for especially high-value goods. You have to learn it, even though it feels like carving a marble statue every time you write. Date loaf. Pictographs are beautiful in the same way peacocks are aerodynamic. Not at all. Every word is a tiny artwork. Every sentence, a mural. And if you make one wrong line, you might be calling someone's mother a goat instead of praising their barley yield. It's high-stakes calligraphy, and your hand is cramping. You pause to rest, flexing your fingers. A fellow student beside you is quietly crying over a particularly stubborn hawk symbol. You pass him a date, and he sniffles a thank you. Solidarity through mutual wrist pain. Historians still argue whether the Phoenicians ever truly mastered hieroglyphs, or if they just got really good at faking it when needed. Either way, there's a growing sense among you young scribes that there has to be an easier way. You've seen merchants mark goods with single signs. Shortcuts, really. A circle with a dot might mean olive oil, while a triangle with a squiggle means fragile. It's not official, but it works. That's the seed of it, isn't it? Function over form, clarity over ceremony. Later, you visit a warehouse where an older scribe shows off his prized scroll of Egyptian text. It's gorgeous. He tells you it took him 11 months to write. You ask how many people can read it. He shrugs and says, maybe 3. That math feels unsustainable. That night at dinner, you complain about the fish symbol again. Your friend says, why not just use a letter? You blink. What letter? He shrugs. I don't know. Make one up. You both laugh, but the idea sits in your head like an uninvited guest. The next morning, you skip practice and wander down to the docks. There, you see a crate marked not with hieroglyphs, but with 3 jagged lines in a circle. You ask the chiffon what it means. Grapes, he says. You nod slowly. Easy to write? He adds. Faster, too. You borrow a stick and scratch the symbol into a patch of dirt. 1 line, 2 slashes, circle. You hum the word grape under your breath and imagine what sound each shape might represent. G. Alright. Uppa. Grapes distilled into 3 pieces. That's not just writing. That's efficiency. There's a story, half myth, half merchant gossip, about a Phoenician trader who lost a fortune when a misread hieroglyph changed. Tax exempt. To tax doubled. Supposedly, He tossed his stylus into the sea and started inventing simpler marks on his boat deck with a charcoal nub. You feel a kinship with that fictional soul. You return to your wax tablet and scrawl something new, not the fish symbol, but three angled marks that sound out. Dag. The Semitic root for fish. It's ugly. It's wrong. But it feels readable. And that's the turning point, isn't it? Writing not for art, not for gods, but for other tired, sweaty humans just trying to document lunch. Simpler shapes, fewer strokes, faster training. Suddenly the world opens. You tell your teacher about your dag idea. He rolls his eyes. That's not writing, he says. You shrug. It worked, though. Later, you sneak a look at an Egyptian carving on a nearby temple wall, rows of gods, birds, eyes, and symbols so intricate they make your head spin. They're beautiful, yes, but also static, locked in time. Sacred, sealed, immutable. And yet, on the crate you helped load that afternoon, someone has scratched Biggie into the wood in 3 quick slashes. You don't know who Bog is or what it means, but you read it. Instantly. It's a kind of magic. Quiet, mundane, but revolutionary. Writing not carved in stone, but passed from collused hand to collused hand, from merchant to dockhand, from lunch list to contract, from fish symbol to dag. One fewer pictograph, one more letter. The alphabet is coming, and it's showing up right under your nose, tucked between fish guts and cedar planks. You're in the back room of a bustling Tyrian warehouse, staring at a cracked, sun-dried tablet from Mesopotamia. It's heavy, smells faintly of moldy dates, and contains exactly 127 tiny wedge-shaped impressions. Supposedly, they spell out a list of sheep. You don't see it. The overseer beams with pride as he points to the rows. See that mark? That's you number 4. And this one is... He falters, squints, and mutters, no, wait, that's grain. You blink. So does he. Cuneiform is the prestige format around here. Babylonian imports come wrapped in it like silk. But copying it? That's an arm workout with the finesse of stabbing clay with a toothpick. You poke your stylus into a practice slab and feel your wrist scream after the 3rd symbol. You haven't even gotten to the verbs yet. You groan. There's got to be a faster way. The scribe nods sagely. There isn't. But even he admits, off the record, that fewer people are bothering to master cuneiform. It takes years, it's inflexible, and it requires an endless parade of exact indentations. Miss one. Your receipt for figs becomes a death threat. Not ideal when sending IOUs to distant ports. There's a growing fringe movement. Quiet, dusty, often dismissed. That says sound-based symbols might just replace all this. Not officially, of course. The priests and bureaucrats would throw a collective sandal. But among traders, the buzz is real. Historians still argue whether the alphabet was directly inspired by cuneiform's frustrations, or whether it evolved beside it like a rebellious younger sibling. You suspect the truth is simpler cuneiform was like writing with bricks, and people just wanted pencils. That night, you and a friend test a theory. You transcribe the word for date using early consonant symbols, DGT. You slap the clay and say, "Raid this?" He says, "Dagat." Close enough. You laugh and toss a real date into his mouth. You keep experimenting. Ship. Goat. Silver. Each time, you whittle the sound down to 2 or 3 marks. It's rough, imprecise, but weirdly satisfying. Like writing in emojis that everyone kind of understands. Your friend scribbles something that looks like a lightning bolt. "What's that?" you ask. "That's a Z," he says. "Because it looks fast." You pause, then nod. Logic. A fringe tale says one clever Phoenician prankster once used sound-based symbols to forge a delivery notice that rerouted a shipment of figs from Byblos to his mother's house. It worked. His punishment, he had to invent a symbol for oops. You look at the cuneiform slab again. It's impressive. Dense. Absolute overkill for ordering garlic. Your warehouse now uses a mix of systems. Official document still in cuneiform or Egyptian script, but inventory lists. That's increasingly alphabetic, and people are starting to notice how much faster it is. You visit a trader in Tyre who's carved a series of early letters into the wall of his shop: a triangle, a line, a hook. TLK, he says, means talk. You blink. A's in, come inside and talk. He grins. Advertising. A scholar nearby scoffs. That's not real writing, he mutters. The shopkeeper shrugs. Still works. There's an undeniable shift in the air. Clay tablets are giving way to scraps of papyrus. Long prayers are replaced with short messages. And those messages, they're being written by people who don't call themselves scribes. You pass a school where a young girl is practicing the alphabet on a wax board. Her strokes are sloppy, but she's smiling. You wonder how long it would have taken her to learn cuneiform. Probably longer than it takes to grow a sheep. The scribe you trained with once told you, writing is memory carved in mud. But now, you think it's more than that. Writing, your kind of writing, is speech made visible. Not ceremonial, not sacred. Just you trying to be understood by someone who isn't standing next to you. You scratch out one last practice line in your wax and say it aloud, NTLK, to speak. Not bad for a few squiggles. You flex your fingers and realize you haven't cramped up once all day. Progress. You're crouched behind a busy fish stall, ducking the noonday sun, and nursing a sliver of roasted garlic tucked into bread. Next to you, a scribe with a crooked nose is balancing a wooden tablet on his knee. He chews while scribbling down cargo items with a stylus he sharpens on his sandal. Lunch is happening, but so is innovation. This is when the alphabet really gets rolling. Mid-bite, mid-deal mid, gripe about last week's rotten lentils. The current system. It's part genius, part guesswork. You're working with about 22 symbols now. All consonants. No vowels yet. Vowels are, apparently, for the rich, or the Greeks. Or maybe they just haven't been invented yet. Either way, your words look like someone spilled their tools and decided to read the mess aloud. You write BRD, and it might mean bird, board, or beard. Context is king, so are wildly inaccurate assumptions. But hey, it's faster than trying to sketch an entire pigeon. You're surrounded by food, people, and conversation. The chaos helps. Each shouted order, each price haggled, becomes an experiment in compression. Can you reduce a sack of salted mullet from Byblos to just 5 marks and a shrug? Maybe you and your fellow scribes start turning lunch into workshops. You sketch letters on bread crusts. You pronounce them through mouthfuls of figs. You debate whether the hook's shape should be G or Q. Eventually, you settle arguments with thumb wrestling. Historians still debate whether this Phoenician consonant only script was intentionally minimal, or just the result of too much sun and too little wax. Some scholars suggest it reflects the Semitic structure of the language, where consonants carry the meaning and vowels are just seasoning. Whatever the reason, you roll with it. Who has time for extra symbols? You invent a new sign over hummus, a bent line with a dot. It feels like a T, or maybe a D. You chew. T, definitely. T. You hear rumors that someone in Sidon's marketplace tried to standardize the letters, even posted a wooden placard with all 22 symbols in order. People laughed at first. Now they copy it down and keep it behind the olive barrels. Alphabet cheat sheets. Revolutionary. There's a weird thrill in watching this happen. Words aren't sacred anymore. They're public tools. Like baskets or weights, you spot a child scratching letters into the dust with a stick. He's not reciting prayers. He's spelling dog. And maybe dad. Hard to tell without vowels. One fringe anecdote says a merchant accidentally proposed to a camel herder because his consonant, only letter for gold, also meant marriage. In the wrong context. They laughed. Then they did the deal anyway. Back in the stall, your garlic-scented colleague is labeling amphorae with 3 letter codes. He murmurs, MNK. Monk? Mink? You shrug. Maybe it's mullet. He adds a fish doodle for clarity. Hybrid writing. Best of both worlds. You begin carving letters into cedar scraps for practice. They stack easier than clay tablets. Some you toss into the harbor just to see if they float. A few do. One of them says ZLK. No idea what it means, but it makes a nice splash. You're writing faster now, even if your spelling's a mess. But it's not about perfect words. It's about getting the job done. Did the crate get to the right dock? Did the message reach the right trader? Did someone understand that? FRG meant frogs, not figs. You make a bet with another scribe. Who can write out a shipping manifest using only consonants and have it still be readable the next day? You win. Barely. He accuses you of cheating by using fewer ambiguous words. You accuse him of being too poetic. A very Phoenician insult. You test your system on a new apprentice. He picks up all 22 consonants in less than a week. You blink. Egyptian took years, cuneiform even longer. This is learnable. Reproducible. Dangerous? Because if a kid can write, he can record. If he can record, he can trade. If he can trade, he can earn. And if he can earn well, the scribes at the temples are suddenly not the only ones with power. You walk through the market, watching your letters pop up in unexpected places. Scratched into walls, painted on jars, doodled in the dust beside footprints. This isn't official yet, but it's happening. You sit under a shady fig tree, wipe your hands on your tunic, and look at your lunch: flatbread, cheese, a few olives. You scribble LBN for Liban. Milk. Not fancy, but clear, and that's what the alphabet is starting to be: not fancy, but clear. The tavern is half full, which means you have just enough elbow room to ruin a wax tablet with wine stains. You're seated at a rough, hewn cedar table surrounded by your usual scribal suspects: apprentices, traders, one bored priest, and a goat nibbling someone's sandals. It smells like roasted chickpeas, old smoke, and ink. The drinks are lukewarm, the conversation is erratic, and tonight, you're naming letters? Over a plate of olives and pickled turnips, your friend smacks his palm on the table and says, Aleph! That's the one that starts with the sound, right? Like ox. You nod, mostly because he's shouting and spitting bits of onion. Someone else chimes in, then bet. It's a house. Sounds like a bee. The priest groans. You're making this up over snacks? He's not wrong, but he's missing the point. This is how it always happens. Language bending in between bites and burps. And tonight, Aleph and Bet are walking into a tavern and sitting down next to Jimel, Dalit, and Zayn, ordering wine and rewriting the world. You scratch a few symbols into your tabletop with a bone pick. Someone hands you a charcoal nub to clarify. Before long, your corner of the tavern looks like the inside of a scribe's dreams. Scrawls, grids, and excited arguments about whether Yud should have a tail. Historians still argue whether the names of these letters, Aleph, Bet, Jamel, and the gang, were meant as teaching aids or just catchy nicknames tied to familiar things: ox, house, camel, door. You argue it's both. Memory likes metaphors. So does wine. You test the system aloud, a sing, song, chant. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalit. It's weirdly satisfying, catchy. You turn it into a jingle. A kid nearby starts humming it. Alphabetic karaoke is born. Someone proposes a game and guess the sound from the symbol. You draw a wavy line. Snake, someone yells. S, someone else says. You declare both correct and pour more wine. Congratulations, you've created educational happy hour. A fringe theory suggests that these names and symbols were first taught to children using animal drawings. Aleph as a cow's head, Bet as a house with a door, and that the alphabet began not as a grand project, but as a casual mnemonic device. You believe it. You're watching it unfold in real time. The tavern's wall bears the evidence. Symbols scratched into plaster with chalk and knife tips. LMN. Someone's initials. Or maybe a menu item. Hard to say. But everyone's writing, or trying to. Someone tosses out a jokey. If Aleph is an ox, does that make Tav a cross-eyed cow? You laugh too hard, spill your drink, and draw a crooked tab to commemorate. It looks like a bent nail. You declare it brilliant. The goat sneezes in approval. Soon, the tavern keeper asks what all the symbols mean. You explain. She raises an eyebrow. So you're making letters? You nod. She shrugs. Just don't carve them into the benches. Again. Outside, the night is warm. Moonlight splashed across the stone streets. You stumble out with your friends, half drunkenly reciting the alphabet like it's a prayer. Aleph. Bet. Gimel. Dalet. Heh. Vav. You pause. Wait. Vav or Wa? Debate erupts. More scribbles are made. You find a quiet spot near the well and stare up at the stars. Somewhere up there, maybe a god is watching your clumsy letter party and wondering what the point is. But, you're not just creating sounds. You're creating memory, portability, a way for someone 100 miles away or 100 years from now to know exactly what you meant when you scratched Dalet into a crate of dates. In the silence, you reach into your pouch and pull out the little cedar tile you carved earlier. One side reads, Aleph. The other, Bet. You smile. The first two letters of your alphabet. And you realize the first two letters of the word alphabet. You didn't mean to invent a global writing system over dinner. But there it is, rising between cups of wine, roasted onions, and the sound of a goat trying to chew a sandal strap into a vowel. You head home, cedar tile in hand, brain humming with consonants, wondering if anyone will remember this night. You doubt it, but maybe one day a kid will chant Aleph, Bet, Gimel before bed like a lullaby. And maybe she'll fall asleep knowing her thoughts can live outside her head. The morning sun slices through Tyre's haze as you run your hand along a stack of smooth cedar planks, freshly hewn and smelling like sun-warmed honey. You're supposed to be inventorying timber for shipment to Egypt, but instead, you've pulled out a small knife and started carving letters. This isn't graffiti. Well, not just graffiti. It's a test. You scratch BLT into one of the beams. No, not a sandwich. It's short for balat, plank, in your dialect. You step back and admire your work. The letters are blocky, no frills. They don't soar like hieroglyphs or dig like cuneiform. They just sit. Solid, legible, wood, cut honest. Writing on cedar has a kind of poetry. These trees grew in the mountains of Lebanon for decades, maybe centuries. And now, they're bearing symbols that took shape in a tavern and a dozen overheard fish orders. You're not alone. Around the port, letters are appearing on ship hulls, crates, barrels, even the inside of someone's shield. One creative sailor used pitch to inscribe his girlfriend's name on the rudder. 2 vowels missing. Bold move. Historians still debate whether these inscriptions were formal records or just seafaring scribbles. But here, now, it feels like a movement. Writing isn't just for scrolls anymore. It's part of the infrastructure. A dockworker points to your carved BLT and says, Plank. You blink. He can read it. He's barely literate by priestly standards, but this he knows. That's a shift. That's revolution in 3 letters. You go to the carpenter's yard, where a bored apprentice has turned scrap wood into practice boards. He's etched every known consonant into them, complete with helpful drawings. Aleph has tiny horns. Bet is a house with a smiley door. Someone's clearly been teaching the alphabet like it's a game. It is a game, and you're all winning. Slowly, roughly, with splinters. There's a story floating around that a Phoenician ship was once rescued from being impounded in Egypt because a dock officer read the alphabet letters carved into the cargo manifest and realized it matched his own new study guide. They let the shipment pass. After quizzing the captain on 3 letter words, you carve NGL, Nigella, we carry, into the side of a cart. A boy runs past and recites the letters as he goes. You wonder if he thinks they've always existed. At the port, you oversee loading a shipment to Cyprus. Every amphora has a symbol, not pictographs, not divine symbol, just letters. YN, yen, wine, MH, mele, salt. The stevedores call them out as they go. sounding like a strange choir. The Greek merchant watching you raises an eyebrow. You don't use Egyptian. He asks. You shake your head? Not for wine. He nods thoughtfully. Seems easier. You don't say it aloud, but that's the point. Later in your workshop, you attempt a full sentence using only carved letters. ANKRTLB. You read it back slowly. Anchorately, Bayant. We anchored near home. It's crude, awkward, a little lopsided. But it works. You made a sentence from wood. There's something profound about that. You didn't pray to a scribe god. You didn't need royal approval. You just picked up a knife and told the world something. That night, under lantern light, you help a younger scribe invent a new letter. He wants a better symbol for shesh, something that doesn't look like a trident. You try curves, lines, a spiral that looks like a seashell. You settle on a sideways squiggle. Shin? He names it, you smile. It feels right. He carves it into a bench, then adds a smiley face. You don't stop him. Let the archaeologists figure that one out. By now, the city itself is humming with alphabetic energy. People label their baskets. Carve love notes into doorposts. You spot RM, Rama, throw on a slingshot. You laugh. Cedar used to be just wood. Now it's a canvas, a messenger, a co-conspirator, and maybe, someday, a museum piece. The wind snaps your sail as the Phoenician galley slices across a glassy stretch of Mediterranean, cargo hold packed with cedar planks, glass beads, and more than a few scribbled wooden boards. You're lying on your back, balancing a tile on your chest, watching the symbols you carved catch the sunlight. This little tile reads TSH, Tash, meaning to go. Seems appropriate. You're not sure when it happened exactly, but the alphabet has hitched a ride. Not just with you. With every sailor, every merchant, every wandering apprentice with a bit of chalk and a spare scrap of pottery. The letters are moving, crossing seas, slipping into new mouths and unfamiliar tongues like they've always belonged there. The sailors are chanting now, hauling the lines in rhythm. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Your alphabet is a work song. In the cargo hold, one of your cedar boards ends up near a pile of olive oil amphorae meant for Cyprus. Later, you find the same board in a market stall in Kishan, now covered in added symbols, local variations, maybe Greek guesses. Someone's already borrowing your system. Historians still debate how much of the alphabet's spread was intentional versus accidental, but you've watched it happen. A crate marked DGM, Degim, fish, gets noticed by a Cypriot buyer. He asks what the squiggles mean. You tell him. The next time you visit, he's labeled his stall with something that looks like DKM. Close enough. You start noticing your letters outside of Phoenician spaces, scratched into the walls of inns, burned into boat rudders, even on the edge of a child's toy spinning top. Like stowaways, they've crept aboard, slipped across borders, and nestled into foreign streets. There's a rumor of a ship that wrecked near Rhodes, where the survivors scrawled letters into driftwood to record their names. Local fishermen used those scraps to light fires and saw the letters. Now there's an alphabetic shrine built from salvaged wood just because someone thought the symbols might be sacred. You stop in Byblos, and the port master hands you a papyrus letter marked entirely in early alphabetic script. Received this from Tyre. He mutters. Had to find a boy to read it. You smirk. It's catching on, you say. He grunts. Faster than lice. That night, under the stars, you sit by the beach, scratching a fresh set of letters into a clay pot shard. You try adding vowel markers. Just dots. Maybe lines. But you're not sure. It feels like tempting the gods. Still, the letters are growing, changing, bending with the wind. A fringe tale you hear in a tavern says that a young boy in Egypt learned the entire alphabet in a week, then used it to write his own version of a popular hymn. The priests were horrified. The boy's parents were thrilled. The hymn got stuck in everyone's head. On a return trip from Crete, you find that someone else aboard your ship is also using the alphabet. Not one of your crew. A grain trader from Carthage. He's got a wax tablet with notes in the same 22 characters, though his shapes are a little sharper. You exchange looks. No words needed. You're already speaking a common script. You start adding dates next to your carvings, just for fun. 13th moon. High tide, spring. You figure someone will find these later and wonder what BZT meant. You're not sure either. It was probably a joke. Your captain demands to know what's written on the crates. And when you show him, he says, as long as it floats. I don't care what language it speaks. You chuckle, but then you realize your letters are now part of the journey, like salt spray and rope knots. Expected. Ordinary. The alphabet, once a lunchtime experiment, is now a passenger on every voyage. A smuggled tool. A cargo item with no weight, but infinite range. You fall asleep that night in your hammock. The boat rocking beneath you. Cedar board tucked beneath your head. It reads SN, the root for sleep. You grin, whisper the letters into the dark, and drift off. Somewhere, someone else is whispering the same letters, in a different voice, a different accent, but the same alphabet. You're leaning against a column in the port of Piraeus, chewing on a dried fig and watching the Greeks argue, loudly, with hand gestures, about letters. One points to a wax tablet. This is B? He shouts. Another waves a stylus like a sword.
No, it's beta, and it needs a vowel.
They turn to you, the alphabet's accidental courier, and demand answers. You shrug and offer another fig. You've brought letters to Greece, mostly by accident. Not in a chest or scroll, but etched into cargo crates and shouted over wine jugs. Now the Greeks are stealing your script and, of course, improving it. They've taken your consonant-only writing system and started shoving vowels into it like olives into bread. You watch as they argue the sound of epsilon. You don't even know what that is, but they do. And now, Aleph becomes alpha. Bet becomes beta. And somewhere in a smoky back room, a new alphabet is being born. Yours, but wearing a toga. Historians still argue whether this vowel innovation was a spark of genius or just a quirk of the Greek language demanding representation for all those airy sounds. But you see the result. Words like agora and hera suddenly appear in full phonetic glory, like songs carved in stone. You're amused, mostly. The Greeks have no idea how much they're shaping the future. They just want to label fish stalls more accurately and stop arguing over whether psar means fish or fear. As a hint, one comes with lemon. A philosopher in Athens corners you with a scroll. These symbols. He asks, pointing to your letters. They come from Phoenicia. You nod. He strokes his beard. We should teach them. To everyone. You nod again. Especially to children, he adds, and drunk poets. You raise your fig in agreement. There's a quirky story you hear in a Corinthian bathhouse. Some merchant's son used the new Greek alphabet to write a love poem on a beach rock. A girl found it, decoded it, and wrote back. They've been carving flirty stones ever since. Love letters, literally. You stroll through an Athenian marketplace and see signs written in crisp, new letters. Bakery. Fish. Shoes. One says, hilariously, not a brothel. Ah, it is. These letters are yours, kind of. Bent and reshaped, yes. With curves where you drew corners. But familiar. You whisper them under your breath as you walk. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. It's catchy. Annoyingly so. In a tavern, you watch a group of scholars singing the Greek alphabet in order. It's become a song now. A teaching tool, a lullaby, you smirk. Back home, your friend sang Aleph, bet over lentils. Now it's alpha, beta, over lamb stew. One grizzled sailor pulls you aside and mutters, "The Greeks think they invented it." You nod. Let them. It's not about credit. It's about the letters surviving. You visit a small school on the edge of the city. Children trace symbols into sand with sticks. The teacher, an older woman with ink, stained fingers, welcomes you, then points to the wall. There's a chart of letters, neatly painted. Aleph's now alpha. Yods become outa. But they're there. You recognize them all, like old friends in new clothes. The teacher says, they're learning fast. Easier than hieroglyphs. Easier than that bird, foot nonsense the old scribes liked. You laugh. Birds don't spell. One kid proudly shouts, P, and draws a perfect circle with legs. You clap. Why not? You walk through the city and see graffiti in Greek letters, names, insults, even a rude poem about a tax collector. You grin. The letters are alive. They've left the temples. They're on walls, carts, lovers' wrists. That's how you know it's real. You stop to sketch the Greek adaptations into your wax tablet. You're keeping score now. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. They've added vowels, yes, but kept your bones. They didn't just borrow your alphabet. They adopted it, gave it sandals, and taught it to dance. And somewhere inside, a small, sleep-deprived Phoenician scribe, who once carved Aleph into a fish crate, is quietly proud. You're crouched beneath the sandstone shadow of an Egyptian temple, eyes half lidded, watching as a parade of priests passes by in gold, threaded robes. They chant, rhythmically, their words carved in elegant columns of hieroglyphs above their heads. Sacred birds, bent arms, divine snakes. The wall practically hums with reverence. And somewhere in your satchel, a cedar board with KL, B, Kalev dog, scratched into it with a fingernail. You shift it slightly so the priests can't see. The contrast is almost comedic. Here you are, dragging around a 3-letter system next to monuments that scream with visual symphonies. It's like showing up to an opera in your bathrobe. Egypt is the land of monumental writing, grand, eternal, owned by gods and kings. Hieroglyphs are divine declarations, carved for the afterlife, not for shipping lentils or arguing about goat prices. Your alphabet? It's meant for markets, for shouting, for scribbling, BCKN, 5IN, on a door. Historians still debate whether the Phoenician alphabet ever threatened Egypt's supremacy as a cultural force. But what you see is a quiet revolution, not in palaces or tombs, but in dusty alleys and loading docks. A shipment arrives, and the manifest is alphabetic. The Egyptian clerk squints.
What's this?
He asks, turning it over like it might explode. Finishing offer. Quick read. He tries. Fails. Then shrugs and signs it anyway. Progress. One of your friends, a scribe who dabbles in both systems, says, the Egyptians carve meaning into mountains. We sketch it into sand. You nod. Sand gets around more. There's a tale whispered around byblos that an Egyptian official once borrowed the Phoenician alphabet to write love notes to a commoner, hiding them behind statues. The court found out. The scandal was enormous. The love story, legendary. Walking through Memphis, you find early alphabetic graffiti scratched behind a market stall. Just 3 letters, AMN, could mean anything. A name, a verb, a secret, but it's there, scratched into history. You pass a scribal school where children labor over complicated brush strokes, bending reed pens into tortured arcs. It takes them hours to copy one word. You lean down and carve SLM, shalom piece, into a discarded pot shard and hand it to a student. He reads it instantly. His teacher scowls. You leave quickly. Still, the grandeur of Egyptian writing haunts you. The towering inscriptions, the perfection, the eternity of it. Your letters, they're flawed. Fast, disposable. But maybe that's their power. Because what you're building isn't a monument, it's momentum. Your alphabet fits on boats. It moves across languages. It doesn't need walls or ink or royal decree. Just a stick and a surface, a voice and an ear. Back on the docks, you watch workers chalk inventory on planks, BR, OYN, TMR, dates, wine, spices. A visiting Egyptian merchant watches, intrigued. You hand him a tile and say, try it. He does, slowly, clumsily. Then he smiles. Simple, he says. You nod. Exactly. There's a joke going around. Hieroglyphs are for when you want your words to live forever. The alphabet's for when you want someone to actually read them. It's not true. You take one last look at the hieroglyph, covered temple walls. Immense, eternal, unreadable without years of training. Then you glance at your board, scrawled with letters written in 5 seconds and understood in 5 more. The alphabet may not last as long in stone, but it lasts longer in people. You're sitting cross-legged on the floor of a modest schoolroom in Sidon, teaching a group of kids who've already smuggled half the chalk into their tunics. Your lesson plan is a plank with the alphabet carved into it, each symbol paired with a picture: aleph, ox, red house, gimel, camel. You're 3 letters in, and one of them is drawing a very smug looking goat under, Zayin. It's going well. Outside, the sun is scorching, and the marketplace hums with bargaining. Inside, you're leading an alphabet rebellion. Not everyone's thrilled about it. A few days ago, you overheard a group of elder scribes muttering behind a pillar. They called it childish, unsanctioned, crude. One even spat on the ground and declared, "No soul in those scratches." You considered asking how much soul was in there for our essay on barley measurements, but decided against it. You get it, though. For centuries, writing has been sacred, guarded, revered, locked away behind ceremonial training and years of apprenticeship. Now, you're teaching a 6-year-old how to write LMN with a smirk and a chalk pebble. Historians still argue whether the backlash from the scribal elite was organized suppression or just natural gatekeeping. But you feel the friction every time a temple scribe scowls at your planks or a priest shakes his head at a lettered chart nailed to a bakery door. The alphabet threatens the monopoly of the educated. It's an equalizer, a shortcut, a little dangerous. And it's spreading anyway. You take a break and wander the streets. On one wall, someone's written TRH, likely meant to say Torah or instruction. On another, ZKR, Zikar, remember? Even on the side of a donkey's feeding trough, BKR, maybe, morning, maybe, cow, possibly both. You pause at a stall selling clay pots. The vendor has marked prices with letters instead of numbers. YG, how cheap. KZ, expensive. He grins at you. Faster this way, he says. You nod. Smarter? 2. A fringe tale circulates about a rich merchant's daughter who learned the alphabet in secret and forged her father's seal on a debt forgiveness note. The court didn't know whether to punish her or hire her. She's now managing a shipping firm. Later, you join a gathering of scribes still loyal to hieroglyphs and cuneiform. They argue passionately that meaning is sacred, not to be diluted. You listen respectfully, then hand one of them a slate. Write sunset, you say. He sighs, takes 5 minutes, and produces a beautiful yet indecipherable illustration involving 3 birds and a god with a spoon. You write Sheka, Sheka, set, in 3 strokes. No contest. It's not just about speed. It's about access. You've seen fishmongers teaching each other consonants between scales and sails. You've seen shepherds carving letters into cliffside rock, not for prayer, but to mark paths. Writing is no longer sacred. It's useful. And that makes it sacred in a new way. You walk back through town, nodding at symbols chalked on barrels, carved into doorposts, sewn into tunics. You've even seen stylized alphabets and embroidery. One creative tailor invented a whole outfit using only consonant patterns. You wanted to ask what QRD meant on a sleeve but chickened out. That evening, you returned to your schoolroom. One student's drawn a comic strip with letters as characters. Aleph has a sword. Bet's riding a donkey. There's a whole subplot where Jamel gets lost and Yod has to rescue him with a rope. You don't correct her. You just smile, because what you're seeing is the alphabet becoming culture. The scribes may scowl. The priests may scoff. But the children, they write. And when the kids start writing, the future changes. You're bouncing along the dusty road between Tyre and Damascus in the back of a creaky ox cart, jammed between sacks of lentils and a crate marked BSM, balsam, the good kind. The wheels squeak like they're narrating their own demise, and your travel companion, a spice trader named Ezra, is humming the alphabet under his breath like it's a lullaby. This is the alphabet's next frontier, the trade routes. No more sea breezes or cedar scented ports. Now it's dry winds, caravan bells, and camels with attitudes. But the letters are just as present, scrawled onto cargo boards, painted onto saddle pouches, even inked onto Ezra's palm. To remember the order, he says, holding it up proudly like a magical cheat sheet. At a roadside rest stop, you find a stone slab with KNA, Kana, to buy, etched at eye level. Beneath it, someone's added SHR, Shahar, price. It's an impromptu ledger, written not for priests or scribes, but for every wandering soul with a bag of barley and a hope for decent rates. Historians still argue whether the alphabet spread faster through maritime trade or overland routes. But sitting here, munching stale figs with dust in your teeth, you'd bet on the road. The alphabet thrives wherever things change hands. At the Damascus market, it's everywhere. Chalked on stalls, painted on signs, you stitched onto banners. You see a butcher with a board reading, BKR, Bikar, cattle. A weaver advertises, SRK, Sarik, thread. No flowery language. Just direct to the point, readable by almost anyone who's been paying attention. A young merchant proudly shows you a list of 22 consonants he's copied onto papyrus. I can write my whole inventory now, he says, beaming. Even the Greeks can't read it yet. You smile and suggest he add symbols for vowels soon. He squints. What's a vowel? There's a fringe story circulating that someone used the alphabet to encode a recipe for spiced honey bread, and it spread like wildfire along the trade route. Now half the markets from Tyre to Nineveh are selling the same sticky cardamom-scented loaf. You've had it. It's delicious. You suspect the letters helped make it taste better. Further down the road, you pass a caravanserai where a traveling bard is selling poems written on scraps of bark. All in the alphabet. Rhymes are a little shaky, but the letters dance across the grain. A farmer reads one aloud to his daughter. She claps the bard bows. That's the thing. Letters are transforming, adapting. They aren't just trade tools anymore. They're carriers of beauty, of rhythm, of secrets whispered, and shared under desert moons. You find graffiti on a well wall, ZMR, Zamar, to sing. Someone replies below it, NGN, Nagin, to play music. You chuckle. It's basically ancient Twitter. With better handwriting, as you move through towns and outposts, you see how the script morphs. Shapes shift. Some people curve letters, others sharpen them. Regional flavors emerge. You spot a variant of lambed that looks like a shepherd's staff, a local innovation. You trace it with your finger. It still reads, in one small village, a potter shows you jars marked with what looks like your alphabet, but half the symbols are flipped or stylized. He calls it oars. You grin. It is. You stay up that night around the fire, scribbling in the dirt. You test new combinations, trying to fit unfamiliar foreign names into your familiar letter forms. They don't always match, but you make them fit. The alphabet stretches, doesn't break. The next morning, a child offers you a piece of linen with letters stitched along the hems. TMH, Tammy, protection. You give her a tile in return marked KTB, Kadav, right? She beams. The alphabet is changing, growing, no longer just Phoenician. Not just for fish or figs. Now it's a traveler, a shape shifter, a rumor with edges. And you, dusty, sunburnt, slightly bred, crusted. You're watching it go wherever people go, and right wherever people stop. The sun is dipping low over the ruins of Ogarit, casting long, lopsided shadows across stones that have seen centuries of footsteps. You walk slowly through the remains of this once bustling city, half lost to the sand now, crunching gravel underfoot and wondering if the stones remember more than you do. You came here out of curiosity, really. Whispers on the road claimed the people of Ugarit had their own system. A writing script like yours, but older. Different. You didn't believe it at first. But here you are, crouched beside a half-buried tablet inscribed with rows and rows of wedge, like marks, each one clearly deliberate. You borrow a rubbing cloth, brush away the dust, and peer closely. These aren't Egyptian, and they're definitely not Phoenician. They're alphabetic, but not your alphabet. Your spine tingles. Scholars still debate whether the Ugaritic cuneiform alphabet was a cousin to the Phoenician script or a parallel invention. Some say it predated yours by a few decades. Others claim it was an isolated flash of genius. 20-something characters etched with the elegance of bureaucracy and the efficiency of a lazy scribe. You're not threatened. You're fascinated. You find a merchant in the remains of a crumbled market who once trained under Ugaritic scribes. He shows you a fragment of clay with their script, 30 letters, not 22. More precise, he claims. You shrug. Slower, you reply. He laughs. It's a strange thing, discovering someone else almost beat you to it. Or maybe they did. Maybe both systems were rising like loaves in neighboring ovens, puffing up in the same heat of trade, conquest, and necessity. A fringe tale from a traveling bard tells of a Phoenician and a Ugaritian who argued all night over whose script was better, only to drunkenly invent a third system halfway through. That third system, predictably, was unreadable. You spend the afternoon comparing the scripts side by side, noting similarities. Jimmel looks vaguely like theirs, lame too. But your letters are lighter, freer. Ugaritic feels like carving with a chisel. Yours feels like whispering with a reed. Later, a caravan passes through the edge of the ruins. A young boy jumps down and hands you a tile with your own alphabet on one side and Ugaritic on the other. Double protection. He grins. You hold it like a relic. That night, you sit under the stars beside a low fire, the desert air turning crisp. You carve a message into a piece of bark. NTNK, Natenka, we gave. You're not sure where anymore. Phoenicians. Garitians. Alphabet people. It doesn't matter. You walk among the ruins and feel the weight of all these half-remembered scripts. Their letters may have faded. Their cities crumbled. But their idea that you can bottle sound and preserve it on stone, wood, or skin, that's still alive. Still traveling. The alphabet is no longer just yours, and that's the best part. Because Ugarit might have had 30 letters and a sharp stylistic flair, but you had portability, simplicity, and the sheer tenacity of tired merchants who didn't want to draw a fish every time they meant fish. You trace a final shin into the sand and smile. Your journey crossed waters and walls, survived temples and taverns, outlasted empires and dinner arguments. And now it meets its cousin in the dust of Ugarit, nods respectfully, and keeps moving. The fire crackles. Someone hums the alphabet under their breath. And somewhere, a letter that never existed before today is being drawn by a sleepy child in a market town, dreaming of camels and stars. You're reclining under the gentle shade of a fig tree near the edge of Sidon's marketplace, chewing lazily on a seed and squinting at the mess of letters carved into your travel board. You came here to sell a batch of cedar, but it's too hot to haggle, so you're taking the afternoon off. Around you, the city thrums with familiar rhythms, barkers shouting prices, sandals slapping stone, and somewhere, a very determined goat refusing to move. Your alphabet is everywhere now, and you didn't even need to shout about it. It's spread like lunchtime gossip, fast, sticky, and impossible to trace back to one mouth. On the bench beside you, a toddler clutches a wax tablet and earnestly shows her grandmother how to write Tachan, Tahan, Flar. The grandmother nods, not surprised, not proud, just accepting. Like this was always how it was supposed to be. You stretch, feeling the wood of the bench creak beneath you. The letters you carved into the armrest last month, AKL, are still there. Eat. A warning? An invitation? Hard to tell. It strikes you, in this half-sleepy moment, how quietly it all happened. No trumpets. No royal decrees. Just a bunch of tired scribes, impatient traders, and bored kids, slowly carving the future into cedar and stone. Historians still debate when exactly the Phoenician alphabet became irreversible, when it tipped from curiosity to inevitability. You suspect it was during lunch. One of your old scribe friends wanders by and flops beside you with a groan. "Did you see the news?" he says, pulling out a bit of papyrus from his belt. It's covered in neatly scratched letters, yours, and some others. Greeks are using vowels now, real ones. A, E, I, he shudders. Complete madness. You laugh. What's next? Lowercase? He glares, then grins. Maybe we should start a letter museum. You glance around. The alphabet doesn't need a museum. It's on every surface already. There's a fringed tale, probably false, but delightful, about how the gods once held a council to decide which writing system would rule the world. Egyptian arrived in robes. Ugaritic brought a scroll. Phoenician just came with a pocketful of cedar chips and a smug smile. You like that one. You pick up your stylus and scratch ZKR. Zakar, remember? Into a fresh board. Because that's all writing is now. A way to remember. And a way to be remembered. You look out over the city, watching smoke curl from rooftop ovens, banners fluttering with painted letters, kids chasing each other with painted slates. It's not perfection. It's not grand. But it's permanent in a way nothing else is. You lean back, eyes half closed, and whisper the sequence one more time. Aleph. Bet. Gimel. Dalet. You smile. You started this over lunch. Her word count? 1053. Wind. Down 300 words. Now that the sun has finally dipped behind the hills and the day's long shadows melt into stillness, your body sinks deeper into rest. You've traveled far, from temple walls to tavern benches, from scribal arguments to sleepy alphabet recitals under fig trees. Every stop along the way was quiet, ordinary, and revolutionary. The letters you carried weren't loud. They didn't demand altars or golden styluses, but they endured, because they belonged to everyone. The tired porter, the curious child, the grumpy sailor with an opinion about vowels. They carved, sang, muttered, and whispered your alphabet into permanence. You trace the memory of those symbols now. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Each one a little breath, a soft pulse, a sleepy lull in the echo of time. And just like that, the dust of history settles around you, not with fanfare, but with comfort. With clarity. Outside your window, maybe there's a rustle of wind. Maybe the hum of a passing car, or the hush of your ceiling fan. Let it carry you gently, like a ship slipping into calm waters. You're not scribbling in on sand or clay now. You're resting in the warmth of what's already written. The words are there, always waiting. So take one last deep breath, let your fingers relax, and let the sounds of the day fade. Your story's been told. And your alphabet, yes, even without vowels, is asleep too.